Today is Saturday, June 19th, 2021. We are on board the battleship New Jersey, and our interview guest is Wayne Heselbach from Baltimore, Maryland. Did I pronounce that correct? Heselbach.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Heselbach served on USS New Jersey during the Vietnam Commission. After departing USS New Jersey, Mr. Heselbach also served on the USS Colette and the USS Piedmont. Welcome home, Mr. Heselbach.
Thank you.
And what is your current age?
72.
All right. And what was your inspiration for joining the Navy?
Well, I wasn't necessarily for Vietnam either, but became a soldier to serve my country.
All right. Now, what was the process of joining the Navy as far as from the time you decided to going through enlistment, but right up to boot camp? And then also, how old were you when this was all happening? And what years?
Well, it was 1968 when I had decided. At that time, it was a very turbulent
Mm-hmm.
U.S. and I was in school, and I wasn't in school anymore in college, and it was something that my older brother did, and I found that I kind of had the same interests. So I actually joined what they call the 4 months ahead of time. So I actually joined in '68, but it took 4 months for me to go to boot camp, and I went up to Great Lakes, Illinois in February, which I don't understand why I ever did that, but I survived.
All right, we'll ask you. I'm going to ask you some boot camp questions shortly. But could you remove your hat so we can see
Yes.
your whole face in
Home.
shadow? Okay, much better. All right, so you just said you went to Great Lakes, and what stories can you share from your boot camp days?
Well, part of the reason I was the fourth squad leader, part of that was because they did have some college. So they decided they thought I would be able to help other people and whatever. And I basically just we actually took care of the room what they used to call the Geedunk room, which was where everybody went to have a smoke or drink of Pepsi or Coke or whatever, and we had to keep that room clean every day and whatever. Plus, I also took care of um, taking care of what they call the Geedunk, where people went during their off time from the boot camp of the day and whatever. And we did, we just took care of things and whatever. And we had the inspections. The physical stuff really wasn't that bad or whatever. It wasn't like the Marines or the Army, but we did have some physical stuff. When I actually left the boot camp, I had to hold my pants up to walk out. Even with being in the Navy, I still lost some weight and whatever, which was good. I was in shape, and but there wasn't much, too many things that happened that caused any problems. The only problem we had was they had snow and we would have to go out. And they didn't use machines; they used personnel the snow to take care of the snow in the area. So it was like, okay, 12 o'clock, we want you out there shoveling 3 feet of snow, and then you had to be out there for a half an hour. You came in for a half an hour. You were out there for a half an hour, and then you were done. And that went for all the companies in the thing.
Mm-hmm.
But we graduated in around April of that year, and we were still in blues and stuff like that. And I didn't know I knew about some aircraft carriers from my brother, but I never knew at that time what the New Jersey was. And I was assigned there to go to the New Jersey after boot camp.
All right, so you did not go to an A school
Not
after
at
boot?
that time.
Not at that time. Okay, we'll come back to that then, because I do try to keep it in
That's
chronological.
right.
All right, so when you first found out you were being assigned to the New Jersey, when you got your orders, what was your reaction?
Well, like I said, I figured I was going to be on a ship. And again, I didn't know, I wasn't that familiar with all the ships. Now that I know, like the battleships are named after states and submarines were named after fish
Mhm.
and things like that. And when I got to Long Beach, the New Jersey actually had to be called back. They were coming back from Vietnam, and I was TAD in Long Beach waiting for the New Jersey to come in.
Mhm.
And when they finished, it was only like a week or two. And then the New Jersey came in, and we were assigned to the divisions. And I was assigned to the 4th Deck Division, which was the port side midships. And that that was my assignment. We were either boatswain's mate or gunner's mates in the 4th Division.
Okay, so let's take a step back and you arrived. How did you get to Long Beach? And then describe what you remember of seeing the New Jersey for the very first time.
Awesome.
Hmm.
She was the most beautiful thing I ever saw.
Okay.
When you saw those turrets and those guns, they were something, you know. And when we got assigned, like I said, my duties every day we would get up and we'd be up by 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and we had a certain area that we had to clean up and whatever. Then we would have inspection around 8 o'clock in the morning, just about reveille, or time for the flag, and then we would go eat chow, and then we would come out and we all had assigned places. And my place was again on the port side. We had to clean about 100 feet of the the officers' hallway above where the 4th Division was.
Hmm.
Myself, and two other guys. That's where we did. The thing of it was, since we were coming back, since the ship came back from Vietnam, we were on a 6-day um, duty, and we only had to work till 11 o'clock. And then if you didn't have duty, you were off for the rest of the day because it was the stuff that they were given to the people who actually were in Vietnam, and I was fortunate enough to have some of that, recreation.
Okay. Now, you talked about your duty station, but what about your general quarters station?
I was again on the port side
Hmm.
handling room in one of the gun mounts.
On
And
the 5 inch?
yeah, the 5 inch
Five
gun
inch
mounts.
38. Okay. So talk about what you had to do for that. What was your job in the 5 inch 38?
Well, what they did is you would have the armory down underneath, and they would send up the 5 inch shells. And then our thing was, if they needed, some of the shells could be set timers and stuff like that, and then we would send them up to the gun mount itself, and the guys in the mount, they would, of course, load the shells and then fire wherever they were needed to fire on there. But we only did practice firing because we were getting ready at that time to go to Vietnam. So it was basically practice and
Sure.
whatever.
All right, for clarification, you worked in the upper handling area,
Yes,
not the magazine.
not the magazine.
All
No,
right, so you're actually sending the shells up.
Yeah, they came from the magazine. They came to the handling room, and then we sent them up to the mount itself.
Right. Now, when they come up from the when they come up from the magazine, because it's a twin mount, how do you know which charges go where? How's that
They
process?
they were set that way. You have one for each. When they would come up, there was two elevators that they came up on, and the
Mhm.
guys on the port side or the left side would take care of the ones there, and the guys on the right side or starboard, they would take care of that gun there, and we just kept sent them up that right to the next mount.
Okay. Um, so let's talk about off duty, like the any stories you'd like to share on the ship. What did you do in your spare time? Anything
Most
like
of the
that.
time, I was new to the world. At that time, I never had been out of Maryland, and we would go see the sights. And we actually went on what they call a midshipman cruise, where they had officers or plebes or whatever that were going through their boot camps, and they had a special hat. They had a white and blue hat, the regular sailor hat, and we helped them on practicing doing what they needed to do to become officers. And we basically did a lot of, like we were in San Francisco and we went down to Market Street and we went down the crooked street in San Francisco, Bank Street, and all that kind of stuff. We just took care of the stuff. We ate good and enjoyed ourselves.
All right. Now, I'm actually going to ask you about porter calls momentarily. But before I do that, um, did you ever get to meet Captain Snyder?
No, sir.
Okay.
All the only thing I know is that when on Labor Day or that weekend we were ready to go to Vietnam, and they mustered a 450-man work party to load stuff onto the ship, bread, whatever, eggs,
Mhm.
and all that kind of stuff. And halfway through the weekend, they got a call from the president and said, "You're not in Vietnam. We're decommissioning you and sending you to Bremerton, Washington."
Okay. So you never actually saw action on the Vietnam. You were part of the crew that. All right. So let me ask you about that. Now, most of the crew you met and most of the sailors you served with had already been there. What was the mood of the crew? What was the reaction when those orders came down?
All I know is Captain Snyder wasn't very happy.
Mm-hmm.
Or he was actually Admiral Snyder, but he's the captain of the ship. And I heard he was, I don't want to say irate, but he was definitely disappointed and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, a lot of the people, they were probably happy that the ones who hadn't been to Vietnam probably were happy that they didn't have to go. I don't know. It was just, that was my duty. I was ready to go wherever they sent me and whatever.
Right. Now, so you get the orders that you were decommissioning. Were you on board for the decommissioning ceremony? Do you remember
No,
anything about Captain Pennis? Did you actually get to meet Captain Pennison by chance?
no.
All right. What was did anybody tell you the reasoning? What was the scuttlebutt at the time?
I the only scuttlebutt I heard about is that I think they thought it was too costly,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm pretty sure that they missed the New Jersey in Vietnam.
Right. Um, did you ever find out years later the actual reason?
No, sir.
Okay. Um, I can fill this in for our viewers. Years later, I don't remember exactly when, but it was released that the reason in New Jersey was decommissioned from Vietnam was the North Vietnamese would not negotiate a peace
Ah,
settlement at the Paris Peace Accords.
I can
It
believe
was
that.
on it was on a precondition list that the New Jersey be removed.
Hmm.
All right. So, and I do get that reaction from a lot of sailors who did
Yeah,
not know what really happened. But
right.
the too costly, same thing. That's what everybody, that was the scuttlebutt. All right, so let's go back and talk about while you were on the New Jersey, any ports of call stand out? Did you have a favorite?
Well, San Francisco, but we on the midshipman cruise we went up to all up and down the west coast. But the one that I remember the most was when I went to San Francisco. I really liked the area and whatever. We even went to Haight Ashbury and stuff like that, you know, and we had all the hippies and stuff and everything. But you know, we just knew that we were where we were, and that's what our duty was.
All right, so after you get your orders for your next duty assignment, what was that assignment? And just go briefly, how did you get to your next assignment?
Well, I I met a third class, and third class bosun's mate, and he said, "Well, you seem to have a fairly good head on your shoulders," and he said, "If you ought to, some of the work that's going to be done is going to be some of the hardest work that you will do to get the ship down to bare metal, empty everything out, do all kinds of things and whatever." And he said you should get off as soon as you can, unless if unless you like that kind of work or whatever. And then he's the one who actually suggested for me to go look for an A school.
Okay,
And at that time, I applied for SKA school, and you had to fill out what they call a DD 1348-1, which was we called it a chit. And it was a request for the A school, and you had to go through all the way to the captain or the admiral of the ship. And when I got the orders for the Colette, I knew it was a destroyer. They said, they told me what it was. And they said, you know, I said, well, what about my A school? And they said, well, the Navy will catch up with you just that's the way it is. And it was approved all the way through the ship and sent away. And in October of that year, we went from Bremerton, Washington, and they gave us 3 days to get down to Long Beach again, which was where the Colette was.
mhm.
And again, I was put on the deck force for the USS Colette.
Okay, let's just backtrack 1 second. Just for clarification, could you tell us what SK stands for?
Storekeeper.
And what job is that?
We supply all the ships plus our own ship, and in other words, wherever we went, we would they would come and we would do things and say, but at the time I was still on the deck force, so we mainly just took care of the maintenance of the Colette. And we went over to Subic Bay, which was the dropping off point to go to Vietnam, actually.
Mhm.
And uh, while we were while we were there, we just did our, pretty much did our stuff. We went all the way to Taiwan, which was the island of Formosa, not the regular China that we're friendly with now. And it was pretty, it was okay duty and whatever. And then uh, one of the I don't know what you want to call it, but one of the interesting things were we were working on our ship, and we were following the USS Coral Sea, which was the aircraft carrier 43. And we had a man overboard. And one of our functions was, because they're, an aircraft carrier is 100 and some feet above the water. So our job was to find, to help find the people. And what had happened was we had one of the elevators that lifted the planes up and down. It had lost its gravity and went down.
Mm.
And there was three guys working on there, and they weren't on there. So we're out looking for these sailors and whatever, and they called a muster on the ship to RC. And about an hour or two later, after they did all the muster, they found that the three guys had going to lunch.
Oh.
so so they weren't really missing and whatever, which was good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, so talk about now. While you were on the Colette, you were still deck force.
Yes.
So what was your general quarters station there? What was your regular job? A little more description, and talk about some of the things you did when you had time to
Well,
yourself.
again, basically it was, we kept care of the ship. We kept it from rusting.
Mm-hmm.
We did maintenance on the ship, anything that needed to be done, and things like that. When we went to general quarters, this time I was again sent to a 5-inch gun, and this time I was in the mount itself. And I was actually the hot shell, um, to get rid of the hot shells. In other words, sometimes the ship would have to fire up at a certain angle. And when they fired, the shells would come down and they would actually stay in the mount. And I wore gloves I would grab the hot shell and throw them outside the back of the ship, of the mount itself. But again, at that time, we were still just practicing. We had not gone to our firing station in Vietnam at that time.
Mm-hmm.
3 months after I was on the Colette in December of '69, my first class, E6, he said, "We got a letter from the Navy with you." And I said, "Okay." I thought maybe something had happened to maybe my parents or something or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And they said it was something about an A school. Yeah. And I said, "Oh, yeah, I applied for a storekeeper A school." And the guy said, "Well, there's three things that could happen." They said, "They can send you back from here. They can wait till we finish your tour here, or they can just keep you here, and because of what the cost would be to send me back to, and be transferred, they would say, you're not going, because that costs too much, you know." And I'm thinking Murphy's Law. I don't know whether you know Murphy's Law or not, but it's anything that can go wrong will go wrong or whatever.
Right.
Well, about 2 days later, the guy said, "Do you want to take your 30 days leave right away, or you want to wait till you get back and then, and whatever?" I said, "I'll take my 30 days as soon as possible." And I left the USS Colette on January the 6th, 1973 at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I went to Guam, Wake, Honolulu, Travis Air Force Base, Chicago, O'Hare, and in the Baltimore City. And I got back to my house in Baltimore City on January 6th at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Mhm.
And then I had my 30 days leave, and then I went to San Diego for the SKA school.
Just one quick second. The Colette had 5-inch mounts. What caliber, and was it a twin or a single mount?
Twin,
Twin mount?
yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, they were just called 5 inches. That's all they called them.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, so talk about any experiences or stories you have from A school.
It was some of the best. I mean, we're on. Not that I'm against ships or anything like that, but it was on shore duty for 2 months. All you did was go to class every day. You studied, and whatever, because if you didn't pass, you were back out or whatever. And for 2 months, it was some good. And we saw a lot of San Diego. We went to the zoo and Balboa Park and all the places and stuff like that. We took a couple of trips down to Mexico, Tijuana, because we were near there and whatever. And after the 2 months, I was actually assigned a 2 year short. I was at one time I don't know how I say upset or whatever, but we were getting our orders for where our next duty was, and guys were getting $100, $200 travel pay and a week to get there and whatever, and I got like $20 uh, travel pay and whatever, and I said, what is what's going on? He said, you're going down to NAS Imperial Beach, with the Naval Air Station right there near Tijuana. It was on the border, and it's a helicopter base. And I had 2 years shore duty there,
Mm-hmm.
which was the best ever happened. It gave me the opportunity to study and become all the way up to E5 while I was at the Naval Air Station.
All right.
And we actually took care of the astronauts. Every time the astronauts went up and they come back, our helicopter was the famous number 66 that would pick up the astronauts from their capsules and stuff like that and bring them back to the aircraft carriers.
Okay. Did you ever get to meet the astronauts
No,
in that?
they was all during the ship and whatever.
Okay.
And again, I was a storekeeper. Man, my stuff was to supply stuff for our base and the helicopters that were constantly practicing there for
Mhm.
their duty, either in Vietnam or wherever they may be sent.
So as a storekeeper, your job was all supplies,
All supplies.
regardless of what they needed.
Right.
Okay, great. Now, you did mention to me off camera that you served on one other ship. Would you like to talk about that time? And just again, your general duties on board and your general quarters station?
Uh, in 1972, my 2 years was up, and they ask you where you might want to go. And the first thing that I asked for was what they call a destroyer tender. And the other one was an aircraft carrier. And when I got my orders, fortunately, I was assigned to the USS Piedmont. And they, again, it was at a time when had my 30 days leave
Mhm.
coming. And the guy says, well, you can either go over now and forget your 30 days leave for a while, or you can take your 30 days leave and then you can fly over and meet the ship over there. I said, I'll fly over. So I did the opposite of what I did when I came back to the States and went back, and I went from a Tuesday to a Thursday and ended up in Clark Air Force Base in Subic Bay, and that's where I met the ship. And the Piedmont, our function was we supplied everything to the destroyers, anything from gun barrels to anything that they needed. Our whole ship was supply stores, and we had a metal shop, a wood shop, any kind of shop you needed to fix something on the other ships. And my main duty was I filled out they would fill requisitions, and my job was to look up for the parts that they needed, give them back the requisition, and they would get the parts for their for their ships. And that was basically it while I was on there.
Did you have a general quarter station on the
No.
Piedmont? Okay. All right. So how long did you serve on the Piedmont?
From April of '72 to January of '73, and that's when I got out.
All right. That was my next question, actually. You got out of the Navy in January of '73.
Yes.
All right. Did you do any reserve time?
No, sir.
All right.
Well, you're on reserve for 2 years inactive,
Okay.
but I was never required to. They never asked me to show up or anything like that.
All right. So let's talk about your post-Navy life. And when I say that, I mean this is very open-ended. You can talk about your career, your family, where you settled. Are you retired now?
Yes.
All right. So when I say talk about your post life, that's what I'm looking for. Just as much as you like to talk about after you got out of the Navy.
Well, I basically went back to school for a while, and thanks to the GI Bill, that helped for some and whatever. And then mostly what I did is I got jobs with places that had to do with supplies, storerooms, and things like that. And and sometimes it was aircraft. I worked for a place that actually supplied aircraft parts for Boeing. We were a subcontractor Boeing would sell an aircraft. We supplied what they call the auxiliary tanks, that anywhere from 2 to 10 tanks, to where the aircraft could fly all the way from here to China without refueling and whatever. It changed after 9/11. Boeing stopped getting orders to buy, for people to buy ships, aircraft from them, and they started renting them.
Mm-hmm.
So it basically cut some of the stuff for and whatever. And I basically stayed in some different supplies, things and whatever. And then I worked for a place called Gould, and then when that was bought by Glenn Martin's. And again, we supplied stuff for the Navy, where we supplied things that tracked Russian submarines.
Oh, okay.
We were part of the people that actually found the Red October, if you know what I mean.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And it was what had happened was we would build what they call an array that would listen for the other ships, for the submarines. And off the coast of the Carolinas, the ship ran, and their propellers got hooked into what they call a tow cable, and that had the array. And that's why it had the surface. And what they had a submarine that no one could hear. And they had to redo our arrays, and they made more what they called what they call low frequency modules, and then they had very low frequency modules, which were the modules then that took care of finding the ships that got stuck on on that on those cables.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, that's where I work. I've worked in supply all my life, and I lived in Maryland the whole time, and I never moved more than 10 minutes away from where I was born in Baltimore City, moved to Baltimore County when I went to the seventh grade, and I lived there for the rest of my, except for when I was in the Navy. I lived in Maryland all my life, and I still
Mm-hmm.
live in Maryland. I actually live in my parents' home that when they passed away, I took their home.
All right. And what about your family?
I'm the only one left of three boys, and my
Mm-hmm.
mother and father, they both gone. My father's gone in 1999. My mother passed in 24, and my youngest brother, his father, passed away in 2015,
Mm-hmm.
20, 2016.
Yep.
So it's been 5 years now.
And
And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, and we've been together. He's been a life since, helping me, whatever.
Mhm.
So they're the ones that I keep in contact.
And what about you? Kids, or do you have any family of your own?
None that
Kids
I've
or?
claimed. No, no, no.
Okay. All right. So let me ask you this: is this the first time you've been back to New Jersey since you disembarked?
Yes,
All right. And what was your reaction seeing her again coming up the pier?
I've had goosebumps all day.
Mm-hmm. And what are some of the differences you've noticed, and what are some
Oh,
similarities?
except for the outside where I used to work
Mm-hmm.
on the fourth division, and of course I recognize the guns and everything. Everything is different. I
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't tell you where I slept, where I ate, or whatever on the ship, but it's still the most awesome thing I've ever seen in my life.
Now, during the time after you got off the New Jersey, do you remember when it was announced that the Iowa class battleships are coming back? Did you follow the New Jersey in the news?
Yeah, just basic whatever, but you know, and I watched about the Missouri and stuff like that, and like I said, the New Jersey, as far as I know, had more battles than any of the other three Iowa class ships. It was the workhorse of the four, but the Missouri got the, not that I'm against it, but the Missouri got the glory because of where it was signed the peace treaty.
Right. So, a couple final questions. What impact on your life did naval service have for you after you got out?
It At the time, like I said, in the '60s and whatever, I wasn't necessarily for any war or anything
Mm-hmm.
like that or whatever. And I'm still not particularly excited about a war, but I think that everyone should serve at least 2 years in some kind of service in the military. It taught me discipline and to take care of myself and things like that. Except, I've never been married or whatever, but you know, uh, I've always been able to pretty much take care of myself and whatever,
Mm-hmm.
with a little help from my family, a
Okay.
lot of help from my family.
All right, and one final question, and this is more of an open legacy statement because this will be seen in the future by students, historians, teachers. Um, what message would you like to leave our future generations?
I just hope that we would get out of all the wars and never have to have war again. And I don't want I don't want any of our troops to go to war again.
Mm-hmm.
I know that it may have to be possible, but I don't want them to go. War is hell.
All right. Anything else?
No, I'm just glad to be here, and I appreciate everything that everyone's done.
It's our honor and pleasure. All right, so thank you for your service and taking time to join us. Uh, Unless you have something else, we'll conclude the interview.
That would be fine.
All
Thank
right.
you.
This is Angelo Pizzullo, manager of the Oral History Program on board the Battleship New Jersey in Camden, New Jersey. Today is Saturday, June 19th, 2021. Our interview guest was Wayne Heselbach from Baltimore, Maryland. This recording and any transcripts, abstracts, or indexes made from the recordings will be stored in the Oral History Department of the Battleship New Jersey, the Library of Congress's Veterans History Project, and the New Jersey State Library System. All recordings will be made available to writers, researchers, teachers, and historians. And this is Angelo Pizzullo signing off.